Hello, Gary here. Let's take a look at lesson 1.6, the cost of driving. So we're going to use dimensional analysis here, and we're going to take some complex information and try and come up with a coherent result from it. And here is our problem situation. So Jenna's job requires her to travel. She owns a 2006 Toyota 4Runner. But she also has the option to rent a car for her travel. In either case, her employer will reimburse her for mileage using the rate set by the Internal Revenue Service. In 2015, that rate was 57.5 cents per mile. In this lesson, we will explore the question of whether it would be better for Jenna to drive her own car or to rent a car. So what information do you think you will need to calculate the cost of renting a car? So think about that for a minute. Pause the video. Write something down, type it in. Should take notes on this as you go in addition to entering information in the boxes. Next, what information do you need to know to calculate the cost of Jenna driving her own car? So again, pause, think about it, write something down, type it up. Next, gas mileage is rated for either city driving or highway driving. Most of Jenna's travel will take place on the highway. For one trip, she drives 150 miles, and the price of gas is $3.67. What a deal. Her 4Runner gets 22 miles to the gallon. If Jenna rents, she can request a small fuel-efficient vehicle, such as a Hyundai Elantra, which gets 40 miles per gallon. That's nice. What's the cost of gas for each vehicle? So we want to take note of the different things here. So we have her 4Runner, and that gets 22 miles per gallon. Just taking notes here. I'll put it up on the screen in a sec. And we have the Hyundai, and that's 40 miles per gallon. And she's going to go 150 miles. And the gas is $3.67 per gallon. All right. I think I got everything. Notebook. So what do we got here? Putting my notes up here for you. We have her 4Runner. And hopefully you wrote down that that is 22 miles per gallon. And we have the Hyundai, something like that. And that's 40 miles per gallon. And we've got the trip, 150 miles. And we have gas, and that's $3.67 per gallon. Oops, gallon. Make sure I got that right. For one trip, she drives 150 miles. Question, is that one way or both ways? Good question. Figure that out. Thinking for now, that's just the whole trip. Okay. All right, so unit analysis on this, we need to figure out, again, our goal is the cost of gas, just the gas for each. So we want to turn the miles into dollars, and we have again, miles per gallon, we have dollars per gallon, so the gallon should be relatable there. So in the end, we want to end up with dollars, so I'm going to start with the 4Runner calculation here, and the cost of gas at $3.67 per gallon. And then I can use this piece of information, and when I multiply in that conversion, gallons is in the bottom here, it's got to go in the top there, and so miles should go in the bottom there, and so 1 gallon of gas is the same as 22 gallons for the Forerunner, and that gets rid of gallons, and now it gives me dollars per mile. So this is a nice figure. I'm going to pause here for a second. This says to take the 367, divide by 22, given that that's the cost. And that, again, is going to give me $1 per mile. And if I whip that out on a calculator, I can get the unit price for that, which is per mile, as opposed to per 22 miles. So it's a good time for a calculator. Come on, Desmos. So I want to take that 367 and divide it by 22. And so for the Forerunner, let's get an extra 1/10 of a cent there. Let's call it 16.7 cents or $0.167. We could go either way with it. I'm going to use the dollar version. So I have dollars written here. So I'm going to call it 0.167. And ultimately, really what I want to do that is get the total, so I got to take in the trip cost. So if I multiply that by 150 miles, that gets rid of miles and just gives me the final cost. So note the side trip here was a unit cost given this cost of gas for the Forerunner. So unit gas cost per mile Forerunner. So to get the total cost for this trip, you just need to multiply by 150. Do that right in the same line. So then that's going to be $25.02 for that one. All right, so your task is to repeat that idea for the Hyundai. And to answer this question, you need the total cost for the Hyundai at 40 miles per gallon. And as a side, you could also find the unit cost for the Hyundai at that price for gas. So pause, get that done, then we'll move on. Okay, next, side note, we'll come back to Jenna's situation in just a minute. We played around with dimensional analysis in the last prep lesson homework setup, and we just used it again right here. And so here we're just going to revisit again a slightly different set of values and units. So we got a 20-minute walk loop around a lake near work. I normally walk 3 miles per hour. How many miles will I travel around the lake 4 times? So I'm gonna grab that information and then set it up to pick here. And again, you can just look and guess, but I think it's easier to write it down yourself and then pick the best option. Okay, so I want to take we want to end up with how many miles will I travel if I walk around the lake 4 times? All right, so what do we got? We've got 20 minutes per loop, let's call it, around the lake. So I'm going to write that as a fraction, 20 minutes per loop. And we have another rate, 3 miles per hour. And you could write 1 hour or just hour there, and this could be 1 loop or just loop there. And then we're going to do 4 loops. And what are we missing in here? We got to connect minutes to hours, and we want to end up with miles in the end. So I am going to start off with the 3 miles per 1 hour. And to connect that to this, I need to convert hours to minutes. So I'm going to have to throw in a conversion fraction there. Hours in the top and minutes in the bottom. And there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. So that allows me to get rid of hours and get minutes there. Now that I have minutes, I can use that right there. So minutes is in the bottom here, so I can get rid of minutes by putting it in the top. And it's minutes per loop. And that's 20 minutes per one loop. So that gets rid of minutes and gives me miles per loop. And then finally, I can multiply that by the 4 loops. And that gets rid of the loop and gives me just miles. And so I want a calculation that has the same set. Now the order doesn't really matter. This is the order I chose. Let's see what we have for options here. We've got 4 trips around the lake. I was calling those just loops. I had mine on the end. So that's a good one. The last one is not. So the first 3 on mine are okay because they have the 4 loops on the top. And in my notes here, I've got the 4 loops in the top. I can put it over 1 if it makes us feel better. And then next they have 20 minutes per loop. That looks right, 20 minutes per loop. And again, here, loops in the top has to match with the loops in the bottom. So my first option's okay, the second option's okay, the third option is out. Okay, so bottom 2 are out on my version. Yours may not be in the same order. Next, we got to get rid of minutes. So minutes here is in the top, so it would have to go on the bottom. And there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. That looks good. And then there's 3 miles an hour. So that looks like what I did, but they wrote it in the reverse direction. So let's double check. So I had 3 miles per hour times 1 hour per 60 minutes, and then 20 minutes per loop, and then 4 loops. And theirs is the reverse of that, 3 miles per hour. There's my 1 hour per 60 minutes. Yep, so my version is that sucker right there. All right, using that setup, what is the final answer to this question? All right, so my calculator, looking back at my notes here, this tells me that I need to start with and my version, start with the 3, divide by 60, multiply that by 20, and multiply that by 4. In the version on the screen there, they just did that in the opposite order. They're taking the, let's see, they started with the 4 and then multiplied by the 20 and then divided by 60 and then multiplied that by 3. My claim is those are the same calculation. So I'll do it both ways just to be sure. So I had, let's see, 3 miles per hour divided by 1 hour per 60 minutes times 20 minutes per loop. And then that's going to be times 4. So it should be 4 miles. They had it the other way. So let's see, they had 420 divided by 63. So 4 times 20 divided by 60 times 3. I'm gonna get the same answer either way. All right, moving on. All right, so back to Jenna. So some more information about Jenna. Let's see, what do we got? We've got the price of gas is now $3.50, so we're in a different situation. The length of the trip one way is 193. Ooh, one way, that's significant. We've got the 40 miles per gallon, and we've got the rental car cost here. So this is for the Hyundai. And so I just want to copy that stuff into my notebook. So write that down on your paper. I'm going to take a screenshot of it. Again, if you don't get it right the first time, or after 2 tries, then you'll get to do this in steps. Okay, so we want to know the total cost here. So we need the cost of gas. Now we know how to do that. We did that in the first part of this assignment. And so to find that, we need the dollars per gallon. So I have the gas cost and I have the rental car cost. So two sets of costs we need to put together. So for gas, we've got 350, and I'm going to write it as a stacked fraction, a unit fraction per gallon. And eventually we have, that's one way, and we want the total trip round, so we're going to have to double that. That's important. And the 40 miles per gallon, we'll throw in that next here. So gallons is in the bottom. I got to put it in the top here. And miles would have to go in the bottom. And we know that there's 40 miles for every 1 gallon from that unit rate. And you may ask, well, how do I know to put these numbers in those spots? So again, I want the total cost. So I need a dollar answer. So I'm starting with my dollars in the top here. And then that kind of guides where everything else goes. So now I've gotten rid of gallons and I have dollars per mile. And this is what I mentioned before. We could say this is the unit cost for gas. If we make that calculation, 350 over 40. Now I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to use the miles next. So next I'm going to multiply that by 193 miles. And then keep in mind, that's one way. I need the round trip, so I also need to double that. And I have miles in the denominator. You could view that as over 1. Miles in the bottom cancels with miles in the top. So in the end, the only thing not crossed out is my dollars, which is what I want in the end there. So on my calculator, I need to take the 350, divide that by 40, because 40 is in the bottom, means divide, multiply that by 193, and multiply that by 2. And we can just do that in one shot. No need to do it in pieces, unless you want to isolate the unit cost. All right, so 350 per gallon. And then, let's see, double check the notes there. We need to divide that by 40. And then arrow out to the right, multiply that by 193, and then double it. All right, so I'm getting to the nearest cent, 33.78. So that is approximately 33.78. And that's just the cost of gas, right? Then we need to combine that with the cost of the rental car. So the rental car is $98.98. Gas not included. The car starts with a full tank. And then we just have to return it with a full tank, right? We need to replace the gallons we use, and we just calculated the cost of that here. So we got that covered. So then my rental is 98.98, and I need to add on 15.3% tax. So remember, if your calculator does not have a percent button, percent literally means divide by 100. So that's what I'm going to use on my calculator. Feel free to move the decimal point if you wish. So I need to add on to that 15.3% of 98.98. Get that cost, and then we can add those together. That's the decimal point there. There we go. So I'm getting $114.12. And so the total cost for the rental car, let's see, 8 and 2 is 10. 789.7 for $147.90. So that's the cost of the rental plus tax on the rental plus gas. Again, unit analysis there. All right. Next, we want to do this for Jenna's car, which is a wee bit more complicated. If you own your own car, well, you got to change the oil once in a while. Maybe change the coolant or fill it up if it's got a leak. Maybe you've got windshield wiper fluid, transmission fluid, power steering fluid, maybe brakes, all kinds of stuff for general maintenance. Tires. I had to do tires last year. I have a Honda Accord. What does it cost? It costs $600-700 for my tires, and I think they were 60,000-mile tires. And repairs, yeah, repairs. My Honda didn't want to start the other morning when it was really cold. I got to take it in, figure out what's going on. Last year, I think I'd spent like $800 on repairs for my old Honda. So, but it had been years since I had to put any money into it. So like on average, how much do you spend per year? My guess, my Honda, I've had it for a long time. I probably spent, keep up on maintenance, changing belts, I bet like $300 or $400 a year on average over the life of the car. All right, so we're going to use all of this to come up with a cost. So we're not just going to do gas. We're going to do maintenance, tires, repairs also. And let's make a copy of that. Otherwise, you should write that on your paper. Computer is being difficult. Come on. There we go. All right, so you should definitely be writing this down on a piece of paper. All right, so like before, we're going to have to deal with the cost of gas. So I think what I'll do here is I'm going to come up with a cost per mile for each situation here. So coming down here, so we're going to have gas to consider. And the cost per mile of gas, we've done that before. That's the dollars per gallon. Times the gallons per mile. So we've done that several times now. And so the gallons cancel out there, and what's left is dollars per mile. And we could put that into our calculator, which we'll do in a minute. I'm just going to write it as a fraction. So it's going to be 350 over 22, and that is dollars per mile. To use it to get a total, to add to the total cost, I'm just going to eventually multiply that by the 193 times 2. So what happens if I double 193? Let's put that over here. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 9 is 18. Carry the 1. 2 times 9 is 2 plus 1 is 3. So the round trip is 386 miles. And eventually I'll use that here. Next, maintenance. So for maintenance, we've got, well, that's pretty straightforward. It just says $40 every 3,000 miles. So that one is just 40 over 3,000, and that's dollars per mile. Next, we have tires. And the tires, let's see, they cost $920, and they should be good for 50,000 miles. So they're cost per mile is just like it says, it's going to be take that 920 and divide it by the 50,000 miles, and that's $1 per mile. And you could do decimal versions if you want. I'm going to do that later. I'm going to keep them as fractions for now, so I don't have to worry about rounding. And then repairs. And repairs here, it's estimated from the Edmunds website that for this kind of vehicle, it's about $328 per year. So 328 is the money. And let's say this is for someone on average driving 15,000 miles per year, so it'd be over 15,000 miles. And there's another $1 per mile cost. So you have a couple options from here. We can multiply each of these unit costs by the total miles and then add them up, or we could add up all the unit costs and then multiply by 386. So 2 ways to go about it. So option number 1, multiply each of these by 386 miles, get a number. That's the cost of gas. Multiply this by 386 miles. Get a number. That's the cost for maintenance. Multiply this one by 386 miles. That's the cost for tires for this trip. So we're averaging out those costs. And this is not an uncommon business practice. So that's one option, and then sum those all up. Alternatively, what I'm going to do is try it a little bit different. So feel free to do that. I'm going to take each of these unit costs and I'm going to add them up and get a total unit cost and then multiply. All right, so off to the calculator I go. To do that, I'm going to have to split my screen here. So I'm going to put this stuff over here. Hopefully you have this in your notes. Calculator. All right, so my first fraction was 350 divided by 22. Then my next fraction was 40 divided by 3,000. And my next fraction was 920 divided by 50,000, 50, 1, 2, 3. And my last fraction was 328 divided by 15,000. I think I typed those right. So what this is telling me is if I factor in not only gas, but the maintenance paid on the car, the tires that you have to pay for, and the repairs, then it costs to drive this 4Runner about, at this current price of gas we have here, about 21 cents per gallon to drive this car. Sorry, 21 cents per mile. This is cost per mile. So I'm just going to make a note of that. So I have to put it up here. A total dollars per mile of approximately 0.21. And there were some decimal places there that might be useful. And again, that's incorporating all of this information. And so I can just multiply that by the total trip to get an answer. So there's 2 ways to do this again. You get the cost for each of these things and add them up, or we get total unit cost and multiply by the miles. So next, I'm going to take, in a new line, I'm going to take that previous answer, so I don't have to worry about rounding at the moment, and multiply that by 386. And actually, let's just double check we got that right. 193 times 2, let's see, I think it's 386, right? So that's $82, and then 10 cents is what that rounds to. Or I could say that's 193 times 2, and I get the same answer. So I'm getting, where I didn't do any rounding until the end, $82.10. So one version of this gives me 82.10 for this. If I do it this other way, let's see if that comes out the same or different. That's going to be a little bit more work because I have to break these down one at a time. So I would have to take the 3.5 divided by 22 and then multiply by 386. And similarly, I would have to take the 40 divided by 3,123 and multiply that by 386. And then I have to take the 920 divided by 50,000, multiply that by 386 miles, and take the, what was the last one, 328 divided by 15,000, 0 times 386. So let's bring those over here so I can write them down in my notebook over here. So alternatively, another way to look at it is 6141. And I bet these are going to be slightly different because I'm rounding at each step here, whereas the other way I only rounded at the end. And then the next one was 515. Next one, 710. The next one, 844. Let's add those up. We have 1 and 5 is 6, and 4 is 10, and then that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Carry the 1, decimal point, 2, 7, 14, and 8 is 22. Oh, well, look at that. It came out the same. Rounding error didn't matter much. Nice. Wow. That was exciting. Good job. Feel free to pause, rewind, watch this again. All right, let's see. I need some stuff back here. Let's see where we're at in our assignment. All right, so we got a total cost for her there. And that's the end of this page. Oh, wait, let's see. Okay, we did that one, did that one. Oh, we're done. Cool. It's the cost comparison. Let's go back and look at the notes. Well, that was fast. That was fun. Where's my notebook? There it is. Computer's being fussy today. So we have for her car, it's 8210. And then for the rental car, it's 147.90. Oh, interesting. So it costs more to do the rental car than it does to use her own car. But what if she's worried about driving her car? One thing we haven't looked at here is, let's go back to the assignment. She's going to get reimbursed for this by her employer. That was down in what? The first page here. How much? And we read about that somewhere here. Oh, right there, 57.5 cents. How does that work into this? So let's get a calculator in here. So we have 57, oops, we should write it as dollars. That'd be 0.575. That's dollars per mile times the 386 miles. Her employer will reimburse her $220. Oh, check it out. So she can afford to do the rental car and save the wear and tear on hers because she's getting sufficient reimbursement to pay for the rental car, which we came out to 114.12. Oh, no. Ooh, wait a minute. Did I finish that? Something doesn't look right. Did I add those up? Where's the rental car? Oh, 147. There we go. I did add those up. Yeah, so 147 is the total rental car cost plus gas. She's getting reimbursed like $220. Yeah, she can afford to take the rental car even though it costs a little more, saves wear and tear on her vehicle if she wishes. Excellent. Good job, everybody. Have a good day.